Hey everyone, this is Neo once again from the Overclocker magazine, and today we have something a little bit different that actually excites me. So, I recently had the opportunity to build my first all-white gaming machine powered by Gigabyte and AMD components. This idea actually came to me while I was reviewing the Ryzen 7 7800X3D, the Aorus Elite X AX Ice edition of the B650E board, and of course the Kingston Fury Renegade DDR5 7200 set, videos of which are linked in the description below. While these three components are nowhere near enough to build an all-white gaming machine, I was actually able to secure the Gigabyte C301 class chassis in white, and I remembered as well that actually I had the Ice edition of the Aorus Waterforce 2 X360 as well. While that isn't every component in white, it was enough to make me curious as to how such a machine would perform, but more importantly how it would actually look. Fortunately, while the Gigabyte Radeon RX 7900 XTX gaming OC isn't white, it did allow me to build a top-to-bottom AMD powered machine. And for that, I was willing to accept at least one component in grey or black, of course. A contrast in color which I've discovered I'm actually more than happy with, or at the very least I'm definitely sure I can live with. And to be honest, I was pretty chuffed with the rig when it all came together, especially since it's a total contrast from my current machine, which is essentially black on black with RGB lighting. Before we got there, however, this is a quick rundown of the building process. I have to say, I couldn't have asked for a simpler building process than what I experienced with this machine, if only because as well I'd used all the other parts before, and what I thought would be several hours of building took just over a couple of hours. The only thing that came to me that was new in this particular build was the Gigabyte C301 class chassis, which, while is actually understated, is surprisingly lightweight, well kitted, and in terms of features and component options, it really does tick all the basic boxes. Installing into this chassis as well is literally as simple as can be. I mean, think about it, it actually ticks all the right boxes, giving you access to things like two USB 3 ports, a single Type-C port, I think it has two discrete audio mini jack ports, and a cycling LED light control button. The rear also offers a 140 or a 120mm fan outlet, and there's a dust filter at the bottom of the case for your PSU as well. Before all things, however, because I am what I am, I first sorted out the motherboard, CPU, DRAM, SSD, and all that exciting stuff first, and followed with the AIO much later. In retrospect, I should have actually done these things the opposite way around and installed the AIO first, but nonetheless, the overall setup was still a breeze. As always, I appreciated small things like the screwless SSD installation mechanism on Gigabyte boards, over and above the looks, features, and all the other bells and whistles I've already spoken to you about in a previous video. And installing the AIO was a little bit tricky in that I had to shift the rear fan down, but outside of that, there were no real issues, to be honest with you. But please be aware, if you are going to use this case with this AIO, you can only install it with the cables, or rather the tubing, coming from the front of the case instead of coming from the back as the manual suggests you do. It's just how the case is laid out and how the connectors on the actual AIO are laid out. But nonetheless, that's not really a big deal, and installing the AIO was really simple for me. The only thing that was left was just to apply my Thermal Grizzly Hydronaut thermal compound, mount the cooler, and I was pretty much finished with most of the build. Once again, it was time for me to deal with the part of the rig that I hate the most, or rather don't hate, but I'm whack at the most, which is the cabling beneath the board. But going to the back of the board, I was actually pleasantly surprised to discover that there's an RGB controller in this case. On the flip side, however, I was disappointed to find out that there's no fan controller, or at least a single splitter for the three front intake fans. A rather bub way of doing things from Gigabyte side, I must say. However, it was fortunate for me that I do have a Y splitter, and I was easily able to remedy this situation. Once I had plugged everything and all the cables, all that was left was just for me to install the graphics card, its power plugs, and that was it. The rig was literally done. And as I said before, the PC came out really well, and I was and still am rather glad I built this machine. Oh, if you are for some reason just wondering how much this entire rig costs in this exact configuration, it's about 57,000 Rand from Progenix if you can get all the parts, or if you're in the US, it's probably $2,500. But I must say, most of that cost is actually made by the graphics card, of course, because if you had to swap out the XTX for the Gigabyte Radeon RX 7900 GRE, for example, you could reduce the total price to about 45,000 Rand. However, in the current configuration, it is one of the fastest setups money can buy for gaming. And performance-wise, well, what is there to say? You've actually seen this exact configuration in my Ryzen 7 7800X3D review, which are the identical components that I used in building this machine. I mean, we are talking memory running at DDR5 8000, we are talking PBO, and we are talking maybe an unlimited or unthrottled rather GPU. And if you haven't seen the performance, however, just know this for sure. I couldn't have built a faster gaming PC if I tried, barring changing out the GPU for something else, of course. But short of that, this will most certainly be the fastest gaming setup I've ever used. And once again, I am so chuffed with just how much of an upgrade this is over my previous gaming machine. I am rather excited to use it for my first game, whatever that will be. With that said, let me know what you guys think and what was the last rig that you built, are building, or are even using. And as usual, thanks for tuning in, guys. Remember to share, like, subscribe, but most of all, please take care of yourselves. And until next time, peace.